Did you ever watch The Wonder Years? Or maybe you like films like Stand By Me or The Sandlot? Well, you might just enjoy the new film, Apollo 10 and a Half, A Space-Age Childhood, that's landing on Netflix today. Sorry for the pun. Just please don't unsubscribe. Apollo 10 and a Half, A Space-Age Childhood tells the story of the first moon landing in the summer of 1969 from two interwoven perspectives, the astronaut and mission control view of the triumphant moment, and through the eyes of a kid growing up in Houston, Texas, who has intergalactic dreams of his own. This is from director Richard Linklater, and it utilizes a film technique that he's used before. This is rotoscoped, meaning that it's filmed as live action and then painted over to create an animated effect. Now, it looks wonderful, and it adds a small sense of realism to the animation. We follow a young boy who lives in Houston near NASA, where his father happens to work. And like many kids and even adults during that time, the space race was a top-of-mind topic, and many were excited to watch the rockets launch, eventually culminating with man walking on the moon. This is told in sort of a fantastical way, and I went into it thinking this was going to be mostly about an imaginary space mission that involved a kid who's sent to the moon in advance of the adult astronauts. While there is a little bit of that, the majority of this storytelling is simply nostalgia, taking a look back at the summer of '69, which is an awesome Bryan Adams song, by the way. And then it follows a young boy's adventures. Now, there's some mild humor in this that made me chuckle more than laugh out loud, and I don't really think that the humor is meant to elicit belly laughs. Some of the situations are just cute or funny, and they're designed to make you smile, which most of them did. As the story begins, we get a glimpse into the imaginary scenario where NASA has created this lunar lander, but they messed up with the math and made it too small for an adult. So naturally, they decide to send up a kid. As we follow some of the training the boy endures, the training takes a pause to then dive very heavily into nostalgia overload. Alright, seriously, no joke. When the story returns to the boy and his training, I had actually forgotten that we were taking an aside because that aside took almost 35 minutes. Now, I'm not saying that the info wasn't enjoyable or it wasn't entertaining, but good gravy, what a detour it took. The story is narrated by the now adult boy, voiced by Jack Black. And I think he does a great job of capturing boyhood essence mixed with now wiser and jaded adult snark. That's not overly snarky, it's just a bit, though, to make it fun to listen to. The nostalgia trip is enjoyable, but I also think that if you're under 45, you may not get as much enjoyment out of a lot of it. And even then, I think that it's targeting an audience that's closer to their mid to maybe even late 50s. And that's not to say that if you're younger that you can't enjoy it. I'm much younger and I still had some fun with it. Now, there is a line that we took issue with this in its accuracy during the film. The narration was talking about some of the things that were normal for kids to experience in 1969, and it had stated that they were the last generation to do duck and cover drills in school. Now, I was in elementary school in the early 80s, and we were still doing duck and cover because the Cold War was still going strong. And, for some reason, hiding under a desk during a nuclear attack was the thing that was going to save us from devastation. The film is 98 minutes long, and I did feel a lot of it. We're watching a few months in the life of a boy where we get to see and hear just a ton of details. And some of them are fairly mundane and even uninteresting. Once the story catches us up and comes out of that nostalgia flashback, the story then interweaves between the fantasy story of going to space and then the actual events which are leading up to the NASA launch. The interactions of the family feel very real, which I think makes this less of an escapism story and more of a memoir. Which, that's still not a bad thing, but it does make the pace of the storytelling slower. The visuals look great, and I love how I could still pick out the actors despite them being animated. Zachary Levi and Glenn Powell play the two NASA engineers who recruit the boy for the space program, and even before you hear their voices, you can tell it's them. And the rotoscoping doesn't change them in a way that makes them unrecognizable, but instead just adds a different dimension to their features. And when all is said and done, Apollo 10 and a Half is an enjoyable ride down memory lane filled with fantastical storytelling by a boy who became fully immersed in the space race as it was happening around him. The animation is effective in giving a realism to what we see while still allowing for the childlike imagination to take hold. The story feels longer than it is, and if you're not into the nostalgia trip that takes up about half the story, you probably won't be into this at all. The voice work and really the acting itself is good, capturing action and emotion before being painted for the final product. Now, one thing that is a huge standout in the film is the soundtrack, filled with popular songs from the time that can have you tapping your foot and maybe even singing along. There's no sex or nudity, a little bit of profanity, and some violence. I give Apollo 10 and a Half, A Space-Age Childhood 3 out of 5 couches. So if you could be launched into space, would you do it? That's assuming, of course, that you'd be in some sort of ship and not just in your skivvies. But let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.